A girl sits in a summer field, sunlight on her dress, the grass bending softly around her. Behind her, where her father remembered empty air, a pale figure appears in the developed photograph, standing upright like someone who arrived from another version of the day. That is the strange power of an image. It freezes not only what we saw, but sometimes what we insist we did not see. We are taught that reality is reliable. A cup stays on the table. A shadow belongs to an object. A memory may fade, but the world beneath it remains solid. Yet scattered through archives, laboratories, airport reports, old negatives, and digital footage are moments that seem to press against that confidence. Some are misunderstood. Some are legends wrapped around fragile evidence. Some may one day receive ordinary explanations. But together they ask a quieter question than fear ever could. How much of reality do we truly perceive? Tonight, we follow 10 alleged glitches in reality, not as proof of a broken universe, but as invitations into uncertainty. By the end, the mystery may not be whether the world sometimes fails. It may be whether human perception was ever complete to begin with. Every mystery begins with a record, and every record begins with trust. A photograph asks us to believe that light once touched something real. A radar return asks us to believe that an object was present, even when no eye could hold it. A customs document, a sensor log, a film negative, a blurred frame of video, each becomes a small witness standing between memory and denial. But evidence is never simple. It carries the limitations of the machine that captured it, the assumptions of the person who interprets it, and the emotional hunger of everyone who wants the strange to be meaningful. A photograph can preserve truth, but it can also preserve coincidence. A document can create order, but it can also become the seed of a legend. That is why the strongest mysteries are not the loudest ones. They are the ones that survive careful language. They do not demand belief. They remain unresolved after the first explanation has been offered and the second still feels incomplete. The 10 cases ahead belong to that uneasy space. They sit between science and folklore, between measurement and myth, between what was captured and what was understood. And the first begins not in a laboratory or military archive, but in a quiet field in Cumbria, England, with a father, a child, and a photograph that refused to behave like a family memory. The Solway Firth photograph feels ordinary at first, which may be why it has endured. In 1964, Jim Templeton took his young daughter into the open air near Burgh Marsh, not far from the Solway Firth. The scene was peaceful, almost plain. A child sitting in the grass, a bright sky. A father with a camera, preserving a moment before it slipped into the past. Only later, when the film was developed, did the impossible detail emerge. Behind the girl's head stood a pale, upright figure, often described as a person in a white suit or helmet. Templeton maintained that no one else had been standing there when he took the picture. The negative, he said, was examined and found to show no obvious tampering. The most grounded explanation is that the figure may have been an overexposed person in the background, perhaps turned away, distorted by perspective and light. The human mind is skilled at turning ambiguous forms into meaningful ones. Yet the unease remains because the image feels staged by accident, as if the camera captured a participant no one remembers inviting. That is the haunting contradiction of the Solway Firth Spaceman. If it was merely a person, why did memory erase them? If it was not, why did the camera remember? The image does not settle the question. It only opens the door to a stranger possibility, that machines sometimes notice what people miss. Far north of the Solway marshes, another mystery rises from the cold valley air of Norway. Hessdalen is not a place that asks for spectacle. It is a quiet valley of mountains, snow, and dark horizons where lights have been reported for decades. Beginning in the early 1980s, observers described luminous forms moving across the sky, sometimes hovering, sometimes drifting, sometimes accelerating in ways that felt difficult to place within ordinary categories. Unlike many sky mysteries, Hessdalen drew scientific attention. Cameras, radar, and automated monitoring stations were used to study the lights. The result was not a clean answer, but something more complicated. A body of observations showing luminous phenomena that seemed, at least in some cases, measurable rather than purely imagined. Some researchers have suggested atmospheric plasma, unusual electrical conditions, ionized dust, or rare interactions between geology and weather. Those explanations are plausible paths, not final verdicts. What unsettles the imagination is the reported behavior. The lights appearing to divide, change shape, or move with sudden precision, like a signal trying to become an object. If the Solway image is a question about vision, Hessdalen is a question about measurement. What does it mean when instruments agree that something happened, but the language of ordinary objects cannot quite contain it? The valley does not answer. It glows, fades, and waits, leaving the next question suspended in the dark. Can reality be real and still be unfamiliar? In a physics laboratory, the strangest image is not a ghostly figure or a light in the sky. It is a pattern. The double-slit experiment is among the most famous demonstrations in modern science. Particles such as electrons or photons are sent toward two narrow openings. When they are not measured in a way that reveals their path, they produce an interference pattern, behaving with wave-like possibility. When their path is measured, that pattern changes, and the behavior becomes more particle-like. This has often been simplified into the phrase, "reality changes when watched." The real science is more careful. Observation in quantum mechanics does not necessarily mean a human eye or conscious attention. It means interaction with a measuring system, an exchange of information that alters the conditions of the experiment. Still, the philosophical wound remains open. At the smallest scales we know how to test, matter does not behave like a collection of tiny billiard balls waiting patiently to be seen. It behaves like something stranger, something that becomes more definite through interaction. For believers in simulation theory, this resembles a world that renders detail only when needed. For physicists, it is a precise and deeply tested feature of quantum mechanics. Between those views lies a powerful tension. The experiment does not prove that reality is code, but it does challenge the older comfort that the world exists exactly as it appears. And once that comfort cracks, other mysteries begin to look different. The turn in the story comes when we stop asking whether a single photograph is strange and begin asking why evidence itself feels so fragile. A man in Cumbria says the field was empty. Instruments in Norway suggest something luminous moved through the air. Quantum experiments reveal that measurement is not passive, but part of the event being measured. Each case belongs to a different world. Family photography, atmospheric research, particle physics, yet all three disturb the same assumption. We imagine reality as a stage and ourselves as spectators. But what if every act of recording is also an act of transformation? A camera chooses an angle. A sensor chooses a threshold. A memory chooses what it can bear to keep. The world we call objective may be real, but our access to it is always mediated through tools, bodies, and interpretation. This is the midpoint of the mystery. The question is no longer simply whether glitches exist. The deeper question is whether the boundary between reality and record was ever as clean as we hoped. That does not mean every anomaly is supernatural. It means every anomaly reveals the hidden machinery of knowing. The lens, the witness, the archive, the instrument, all become characters in the story. And once we see that, even the sky above a busy airport can become a kind of evidence. On an overcast day at Chicago O'Hare in 2006, witnesses reported a disc-like object hovering near one of the world's busiest airports. The story became known for one striking detail. After the object allegedly rose through the cloud layer, witnesses described a circular opening left behind, as if something had punched a clean hole in the gray ceiling above the runway. The image is powerful because it transforms the sky into a physical surface, something that can be marked, pierced, or briefly wounded. There are ordinary possibilities. Weather can create unusual cloud formations. Human perception can be shaped by stress, distance, expectation, and the strange geometry of airport glass. The official record of any such event is limited, and the strongest claims depend heavily on witness testimony. Still, the O'Hare account remains memorable because it happened in a place built on control. Airports are landscapes of schedules, radar, procedure, and regulated motion. Everything is tracked. Everything has a name. An unexplained object over such a place feels like a line of code appearing in the middle of a legal document. The hole in the clouds may have been meteorology, coincidence, or memory gathering itself around a shared astonishment. But the incident leaves a human question behind. Why do anomalies feel more disturbing when they appear in systems designed to prevent surprise? From the sky above Chicago, the story descends into darker water where another shape waits beneath the Baltic Sea. Underwater mysteries have a special silence. They are seen through sonar, through grainy contours, through machines translating distance into shape. In 2011, explorers in the Baltic Sea reported a strange formation on the seafloor that quickly became known as the Baltic Sea Anomaly. Sonar images appeared to show a large, unusual structure, and interpretations multiplied. Some saw a natural rock formation. Others imagined wreckage, ancient construction, or something more difficult to classify. Claims later circulated that electronics behaved oddly near the site. As with many modern mysteries, the story grew in the space between limited data and vivid imagination. The evidence remained incomplete, and the ocean offered little clarity. Sonar does not give us a photograph in the ordinary sense. It gives us a suggestion, a topography of echoes. That is what makes the Baltic case so revealing. The anomaly may not be a glitch in reality at all. It may be a glitch in interpretation, the mind completing a shape before the facts can catch up. But even that is meaningful. Human beings are pattern-seeking creatures. We look at stone, cloud, shadow, and signal, and we ask whether the universe is trying to speak. Sometimes the answer is geology, sometimes it is noise, and sometimes the uncertainty itself becomes the object we cannot stop studying. The next two cases move from photographs and sonar into a stranger archive, documents and images that claim to bend the map of time itself. Some mysteries arrive already half covered in dust, as if they escaped from a locked room no one can clearly identify. The chronovisor story belongs to that category. It describes an alleged device, sometimes associated with Vatican legends, that could supposedly view events from the past. Images connected to the tale have circulated for years, often presented as fragments of a technology that should not exist. The evidence, however, remains controversial and unverified, closer to modern folklore than established history. Then there is The Man from Taured, a story of a traveler who allegedly arrived at customs with documents from a country that could not be found on any map. In the popular version, officials were baffled, the man was detained, and then vanished. It is a clean, almost perfect glitch narrative. Identity, geography, and paperwork collapsing at once. The difficulty is that the record does not give us a simple answer. These stories may be misremembered incidents, embellished reports, or legends shaped by the bureaucratic anxieties of the modern world. Passports and maps feel official, so when they fail, the failure feels cosmic. What both stories reveal is our trust in archives. We want papers to anchor reality. We want photographs to anchor time. But archives are human creations, and human creations can blur. If the past itself becomes uncertain, then the next frontier is smaller still. Not nations, not photographs, but the hidden motion of life inside a leaf. A green leaf in sunlight may be one of the quietest miracles on Earth. Inside photosynthesis, energy moves with astonishing efficiency through molecular structures. Some research has suggested that quantum effects may play a role in how that energy finds its way, almost as if it samples possible paths before settling on the most effective one. This has sometimes been described, loosely, as a kind of tunneling or quantum shortcut. The language can mislead. Molecules are not teleporting in the science fiction sense. A plant is not breaking reality to survive. But at microscopic scales, nature uses rules that feel deeply unfamiliar to everyday experience. The living world may depend, in part, on processes that do not resemble the solid mechanical universe our senses evolved to navigate. This is where the idea of a glitch becomes more subtle. What looks impossible at one scale may be ordinary at another. A particle crossing a barrier it should not classically cross is not a failure of physics. It is physics revealing that our older intuitions were incomplete. The leaf does not need mystery to be profound. It turns light into life through mechanisms we are still learning to describe with humility. And that humility matters, because not every strange image comes from ancient legends or distant valleys. Some arrive in modern footage, high above the ground, where a human body is falling through the sky. A skydiver falls through open air, surrounded by blue distance and the thin roar of wind. In some online accounts, footage has been described as showing a sudden mid-air disturbance, as if a jumper collided with something invisible or passed through a space occupied by an unseen object. These videos are often presented as evidence of a physical interruption where none should exist. The challenge is that skydiving footage is a harsh witness. Cameras vibrate, bodies spin, air currents strike with invisible force. Perspective collapses distance. A strap, helmet, another jumper, turbulence or compression artifact can become a mystery when slowed frame by frame. The more dramatic the movement, the more carefully it must be interpreted. Yet the emotional force of the case remains understandable. There is something primal about the open sky. We imagine it as empty, pure, and continuous. When a body appears to encounter resistance in empty air, the mind recoils. It feels as though the world has briefly revealed a boundary line. This case asks us to consider a difficult possibility. Some glitches may not occur in reality, but in recording reality at speed. Digital cameras do not see the world the way eyes do. They sample it, compress it, rebuild it. And once images become digital, another kind of mystery appears, not in the sky, but in collective memory itself. The Mandela Effect begins in the most intimate archive we possess: memory. People remember a phrase, a logo, a spelling, a line from a movie or a public event one way, only to find the record says otherwise. The feeling can be surprisingly emotional. It is not just being wrong. It is discovering that something once held with confidence may have been built from suggestion, repetition, and shared misremembering. In the digital age, this becomes even more complicated. Archives can update. Search results shift. Websites change silently. Files are corrected, compressed, migrated, or lost. To someone searching for a remembered version of the world, a changed archive can feel like evidence that reality itself has been edited overnight. Most Mandela Effect examples can be explained through psychology, cultural repetition, branding, and the fallibility of memory. The human brain is not a camera. It reconstructs the past each time it returns to it. But that does not make the experience meaningless. In fact, it may make it more human. When thousands of people remember the same wrong thing, the mystery is not only why the record differs, it is why the mistaken version felt so real. Here, the glitch becomes a mirror. It reflects not a broken universe, but the vulnerable machinery of belief. And after 10 cases, a pattern begins to emerge. Every mystery depends on the distance between what happened and what we can hold. A photograph, a radar signal, a passport story, a quantum pattern, a memory. Each is a hand reaching towards certainty. That may be the real thread connecting these cases. They are not all equal in evidence. Some are documented more clearly than others. Some belong to science, some to folklore, some to misinterpretation, and some to the unresolved edges of observation. But each reveals a human longing to know whether the world is stable beneath us. The phrase glitch in reality is modern, shaped by computers, simulations, screens, and code. Earlier generations might have called the same experiences omens, miracles, apparitions, errors of perception, or mysteries of nature. The language changes, but the emotional structure remains. Something happens that does not fit, and we gather around it, trying to repair the map. The danger is certainty too soon. To declare every anomaly supernatural is to stop investigating. To dismiss every anomaly as foolish is to stop wondering. The mature response lives between those extremes. It allows evidence to be incomplete without becoming empty. It allows awe without abandoning caution. Perhaps the unknown does not ask us to believe more easily. Perhaps it asks us to look more carefully. And as we return to that first field in Cumbria, to that pale figure behind a child in the grass, the central question feels different now. Not, was it real? But, what do we mean when we say we have seen enough? In the end, reality may not be a flawless machine or a fragile illusion. It may be something stranger and more generous, a world that is real, yet never fully available to us all at once. The Solway Firth photograph asks whether a camera can preserve what memory denies. Hessdalen asks whether nature still carries luminous behaviors we have not named. The double-slit experiment reminds us that observation is not as simple as looking. O'Hare, the Baltic Sea, the chronovisor legend, the man from Taured, quantum biology, skydiving footage, and the Mandela Effect. Each reveal a different fracture line between evidence and interpretation. Some of these stories may one day become ordinary. A shadow, a cloud, a mineral formation, a flawed memory, a misunderstood mechanism. But even ordinary answers can be quietly profound, because they teach us how limited our first perception can be. The mystery is not diminished by caution. It becomes more durable. If reality is code, we have not proven it here. If reality is only matter, we have still not exhausted its strangeness. Between those possibilities stands the human observer, patient and imperfect, holding old photographs up to the light. Maybe the deepest hidden why is not that the universe occasionally glitches. Maybe it is that we keep noticing, keep asking, and keep reaching beyond the visible edge of our own certainty. Stay curious.